As my retirement comes into closer view, I'm taking a cue from Rabbi David Wolpe, a well-known conservative rabbi in California who retired last year. He used his last several sermons to share with his congregation what had been important to him in his rabbinate. So this will be the first of these final sermons that I'll be giving, in which I will share in a similar manner about what has animated me as a rabbi over these past 4 decades. This Shabbat before Purim, as I mentioned, is called Shabbat Zachor. On this Shabbat, we are called upon to Zachor et Amalek, to remember Amalek, that arch enemy of the Jewish people. Amalek was an enemy who attacked the weak and the elderly of the Jewish people as they were departing Egypt. So the legend grew that any adversary of the Jewish people in the generations following Amalek were his descendants, including King Agag, as you heard about in the Haftarah portion, and including Haman of infamous Purim fame. In fact, Haman is identified as a descendant of Amalek and Agag in the Megillah. Now, while Purim is among the most festive and fun highlights of the Jewish year, before we lose ourselves in the revelry, we're to pause for this sober moment of Zachor. Jewish life is often a balancing act between Zachor, a painful history, and Simcha, happiness. We see that in the Hanukkah story, the Pesach Seder, and of course, Purim. And in that joke, you know the joke, that all Jewish holidays are about the same thing. They tried to kill us, we survived, let's eat. I'm sure you've heard that one. Of course, not all Jewish holidays are about this, and it's a gross oversimplification to say that every one of them is about this. That even one of them is about that would be a gross oversimplification. But the question remains, what is a healthy balance between these two poles? Zachor, remember the bad stuff on the one hand, and Simcha, celebrate on the other. In my view, Zachor is important a couple times a year, but not as the raison d'etre for being a Jew or the sole reason for having or supporting a Jewish community. Identifying as a Jew or practicing Judaism only because others hate us is a prescription for a vapid or empty Jewish life, whether personal or communal. A flourishing Judaism can never be rooted in Zachor. Looking back on these past months since October 7th, I'm dismayed at how many times my sermons have focused on the painful part of being a Jew. These months have held unique challenges for the Jewish people that I have not seen in my 42 years in the Rabbinate. The vast majority of my sermons over the years and over the spirit of in the spirit of congregational life that I've tried to cultivate was not about the pain and the misery of our people. Instead, it's been about the joy, the learning, the depth, and the beauty of Jewish life. And it still needs to be, in spite of the challenges of the moment. Just 2 weeks ago, I told the story of a local college student who goes to school at a university where the anti-Israel protests have been very troubling. Her parents reported to me that their child, who never wanted to be involved in Jewish life as a youngster or as a teen, is suddenly wearing a Magen David necklace. And while this is positive in the sense that it may be a boost to Jewish life on campus, and this crisis may lead some Jewish students into more involvement in Jewish life, relying on tragedy or trouble for the growth of Jewish life or to stimulate Jewish identity is not sustainable. And it's just plain sad. And so at Beth Hillel, I've encouraged us to lean into the simcha and to minimize the zachor. I've strived to ensure that Shabbat and holiday gatherings are spiritually meaningful, festive, ennobling, beautiful, and fun. My primary goal for our school has been to make the experiences of the children and the parents memorable and special. So I became a ridiculous character, Isha Ivriya, to teach Hebrew. I spent time creating scavenger hunts and games and skits to get lessons across. Wanting our members to build a real sense of community, I proposed retreats at camp, and the congregation embraced the idea. Bonds built at those retreats have initiated many friendships and intergenerational relationships. Two statements that were made to me early in my career here have rung in my ears all these years. When I first arrived, I listened to what people wanted from their synagogue and their rabbi. And someone said to me, "Don't make those who do come feel bad that not many people are here." And I think about that every time we have a program or a service with just a few people. Keep it positive has been my mantra. The second statement was made at a meeting with another congregation to plan some joint programming. And a woman from the other congregation proudly said, "My children know who they are. We talk to them about the Holocaust regularly." Yes, Zachor, or never again, is a Jewish value. It's even on one of our stained glass windows in the sanctuary. The word Zachor is there. But to raise this up as the primary Jewish value that we teach the next generation is a prescription for the self-destructive demise of our people. We won't need an enemy to rise up against us, as we read in the Passover Haggadah. We'll do it all by ourselves. So what do we do with Shabbat Zachor, the Shabbat devoted to remembering the Jewish people's endless list of enemies? Do we ignore it? No, we mark Shabbat Zachor by recalling that we do indeed have enemies. Perhaps this year, more than others, this truth is all too obvious and no one needs to be reminded. But we mark it and then turn quickly to simcha, to joy and happiness. And this year we get to turn to simcha in just 24 hours. What a blessing. A role model for how to balance Zachor and simcha is the first female rabbi, Regina Jonas, who lived in Germany during the Holocaust. Ultimately, she was deported to Theresienstadt, but there she continued to serve as a rabbi and tried to uplift the people's spirits by making them feel good about being Jews. Many of her sermons while in Theresienstadt were on this theme. The very last words she wrote before being sent to Auschwitz, where she was murdered, were, "To be blessed by God means to bestow blessings, goodness, and loyalty, regardless of place or situation." This is Shabbat Zachor. We remember our enemies and the tragic episodes of our people's past, but we do not wallow in it. We do not live in fear. We do not hold up Zachor, our painful history, as our reason for carrying on as a people. Instead, we embrace simcha, the joy and beauty of Judaism. May it always be so for us and for the generations that follow. As the day of my retirement comes into closer view, I'm taking a cue from Rabbi David Wolpe, a well-known conservative rabbi from California who retired last year. He used his last several sermons to share with his congregation what had been important to him and his rabbinate. So this is the second of 4 final sermons in which I'll be sharing in a similar manner about what has animated me as a rabbi over these past 4 decades. This week's Torah portion, Tazria, is one of the dreaded Torah portions of all aspiring B'nai Mitzvah, and anyone tasked with preparing a Devar Torah for a meeting or communal worship, because much of the Torah portion has a significant yuck factor. Yucky, considered undesirable. After all, Torah commentary is supposed to provide some edifying knowledge or ideas that we can apply in our own lives. And Tazria presents a very serious challenge to this. How is being unclean after childbirth, or the process of being isolated and deemed healed from an unpleasant skin disease, or how is the description of a moldy growth in fabric supposed to elevate our lives? But Tazria is also about the role of the priests in providing rituals and guidance to help guide people through these moments, difficult moments of isolation, uncertainty, illness, and personal crisis. The priests also help the afflicted by reconnecting them with their community. And these roles are still played by religious leaders today, and no matter how one thinks about prayer and ritual and its role in healing, most people consider this aspect of a rabbi or pastor's work absolutely essential. Pastoral care is not the most time-consuming part of my work, but it may be the most significant. Whether at the bedside of a patient, in a hospital, or sharing tea at a kitchen table with a lonely elder, or listening to a person in crisis in my office, or sometimes on the phone, I'm often called upon to at least be present, and often to offer prayers on behalf of an individual who is in pain or in the midst of an emotional dilemma or a personal calamity. And I've often asked myself, and I wonder that you may too, what is a rabbi's role in that moment? Is it to convince the afflicted person that prayer will relieve their pain, or that a certain piece of Jewish wisdom will take away their suffering? My take on this is that the rabbi is there to be a vehicle for channeling the realm of the spiritual as a tool that can help in growth and healing. A close study of Leviticus will show that this is also how the priests functioned in Tazria. The rabbi's role as a conduit for enabling others' spirituality is also how I view my role as a shaliach tzibur, as a leader of worship. To be honest, I struggle with the idea that prayer is literally heard on high, and that if we are very sincere, it might bring about a divine response. A rabbi's wrestling with this idea may surprise you, but I believe it is a struggle that most of us have. I want to share 2 concepts about prayer that have informed both my roles as a pastoral caregiver and as a shlichat tzibur. First, I do not believe in faith healing, but I believe our healing is enhanced by what prayer offers. This idea is presented in our Siddur, in one of the meditations that appears prior to the tefillah section of the service. It's a statement by the great Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. Prayer cannot bring water to parched fields, or mend a broken bridge, or rebuild a ruined city, but prayer can water an arid soul, mend a broken heart, and rebuild a weakened will. If only it were true that we could pray and the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore Harbor would be miraculously reassembled. Or that if we sang Misha Berach fervently enough, it would somehow heal all of the folks on our list from their cancers and chronic conditions. That view of prayer is not in my worldview. But I do believe that being present for those who are struggling and coming together as a community to pray for healing, be it the weekly Misha Berach or the monthly healing service, I believe that these things are efficacious. These things demonstrate that love and support of other people to those who are means something to those who are suffering, and that it goes a long way to help in their healing. And it gives both the ones who need healing and the one who cares for them the opportunity to share messages of hope, to feel kindness, to slow the breath and the heartbeat and enter a peaceful space where healing and a connection to God can grow. A commentary on this week's Parashat Tazria in the Meshech Chochmah, a late 19th and early 20th century commentary, is helpful here. When a priest sees him, the priest is to examine the whole person, not only the diseased limb. He is to see what is whole and healthy about the person, not only what is afflicted. Like the priests of old, when we, any of us, practice Bikur Cholim, visiting the sick, or when we pray as a community for healing, we provide that broader vision of wholeness and well-being through our unique Jewish spiritual path. The second idea about prayer that has steered my prayer life and guided me as a prayer leader is another quotation that is offered as a meditation prior to the tefillah in our Siddur. Rabbi Ferdinand Isserlis wrote, "Pray as if everything depended on God, act as if everything depended on you." Who am I to say whether God intervenes in our lives here on earth? My theology does not include this kind of divine intervention because I see too much evidence in the world that God does not intervene in situations where a good God surely would. And yet, in spite of my theology, my sincerest prayers are often those prayers that ask God to do just that. I do pray as if everything depended on God, and while leading services, I see myself as a vessel through my voice and the readings I select and the music I share to enable others to do that as well. But I believe that we cannot sit back after praying and wait for God to respond. In fact, we must operate under the assumption that God's direct help may not be forthcoming, and therefore we have to act in a way that we can, in any way we can, to intervene into the situation for which we are praying. We should pray to God for forgiveness for something we've done, but we have to do the hard work of teshuvah, of repentance. We can ask God repeatedly and earnestly to reverse global warming and its destructive results, but we have to do our part to reduce our own carbon footprint and advocate for policies that will correct the mistakes that humanity has made to bring this about. We want to pray for healing, but we need to do everything that medical intervention offers to help ourselves. perhaps God's response to our prayers can only come in partnership with our actions. Prayer life is central to the well-being of a congregation and its sense of community. Over these past decades, I have focused a great deal of my teaching on Hebrew and prayer literacy for children and adults. The goal of this has been to enable our members to feel competent in Jewish worship wherever they go. But I've also tried to encourage individuals to find their own place in prayer and their own spiritual path, continually introducing new music, new prayer books and readings, new ideas about spirituality and prayer, and varieties of styles of worship. Rabbis today are more teachers than they are priests. But that priestly role of being the vehicle to the divine through prayer and ritual and presence in times of crisis is a role that I have embraced and through which I have attempted to grow my own spirituality and that of others. My greatest hope for Beth Hillel as I take my Siddur and go home is that its members will continue their spiritual growth with new leaders who will have innovative and different approaches. It will be a brand new adventure that I know the congregation will embrace. May it be so. In the familiar For Children section of the Haggadah, we read, "As in the pages of our history, so too in our daily lives, these four characters, the one who is wise, the one who rejects, the one who is simple, and the one who does not know how to ask, reappear in unexpected ways. Through imagination and study, we ponder their questions and consider the difficulties they raise, all the while seeking insights to give meaning to our people's narrative and to our own stories." This is a translation of that passage from Mishkan HaSeder, which is published by the Reform Movement in the same collection of books like Mishkan Tefillah, our Siddur, Mishkan HaNefesh, our High Holy Day prayer books, and it is in the same style where there's the traditional text but lots of other readings surrounding it. Expounding on this passage, Rabbi Simeon ben Semach Duran of 14th century Spain wrote, "The commandment is to tell the Exodus story whether by questions or not. In other words, even if no one asks the four questions, we would still have to tell the story." So this commentary in this Haggadah says, the obligation of Passover is not upon the asker, but upon the teller to make sure that everyone can grow from our story. Enabling others to grow their knowledge of and their connection to the Jewish story writ large has been a key focus of my work as a rabbi over these last 40 plus years. As a college student, I loved Jewish study, so I chose to become a teller of our people's story as a career path. After all, at the core, that's what a rabbi does. The Elu Devarim passage that we read each Shabbat morning reminds us that there are many paths and commitments that bring about a meaningful Jewish life, but at the very end we say, Talmud Torah keneged kulam, but the study of Torah equals them all. Teaching and guiding people of all ages and dispositions to grow as Jewish learners has been central to my rabbinate. I have found joy and purpose in giving people, wherever they are in their Jewish journey, opportunities to enhance their knowledge and build a connection to their people and its past. When I first came here, someone told me that the congregation was not really interested in adult education. And there was not a particularly robust program, that's true. Mainly what the Adult Education Committee did was plan the Shemro series, a set of 4 or 5 programs a year of guest speakers or concerts to which the congregation and the public were invited and for which there was an endowment. But I had a feeling there could be more. Over the years, I've worked with our adult education committee to offer a variety of types of Jewish learning to appeal to different interests within the congregation. One of the reform movement initiatives of the 1990s was lifelong learning, and many congregations began to call their professional educators directors of lifelong learning. Well, we couldn't hire an additional staff person, but our committee began to create a fuller program, which continues to this day to evolve. It evolves along with the membership and their interests. Lifelong learning and adult engagement, as our committee has now renamed itself, has become a cornerstone of Beth Hillel programming. And I'm pleased to say that the rabbi is no longer called upon to be the sole provider of that programming. As in the Haggadah, the one who is wise, the one who rejects, the one who is simple, and the one who does not know how to ask are all represented in our congregation, or perhaps some of them are just outside looking to understand or find meaning in Judaism. As Beth Hillel goes forward into its 2nd century, it must continue to offer something to each of these types of individuals and place a priority on always finding new avenues toward that goal. For the one who is wise, to offer serious adult study for the deep thinkers, like the Talmud Circle, a small group of us that met for 16 years, or Torah study, or the various months-long classes where one subject is fully developed, such as the wonderful programs that we've had from the Shalom Hartman Institute and many others. To encourage people to learn on their own, like being asked as a member of our leadership council to prepare a Devar Torah to share with their peers, or to lead services and share a piece of Jewish learning with the congregation, or to lead a Yom Kippur study session. For the one who rejects or does not have time for serious study, to provide learning opportunities that are lighter, like Nash On, or that one might find by simply accessing the temple website or e-news. This is in part why we initiated a very short Devar Torah for the e-news each week. In addition, the one who rejects traditional learning, Jewish learning, is sometimes motivated by causes that relate to the world beyond the synagogue. As a community, we've enabled those whose Jewish identity is focused on justice work by always rooting our social justice efforts in Jewish values. For the one who is simple, who asks simply, mazot, what is this? This is probably our greatest responsibility as a congregation. This person is not unintelligent, but rather a receptacle waiting to be filled. These are adults who never had a chance to learn our customs, traditions, or texts, seekers who are hoping to find in Judaism a spiritual home, and children and youth who are at the beginning of their Jewish journey. For these, we continue to provide Jewish learning in a variety of settings. For children and youth, no matter how low the census may go, we must continue to offer a robust school program, temple tots, youth group, camp, and team weekends and overnights. Even if only one child is present, we teach whatever we had prepared for that class with one student. I have taught an entire year-long curriculum with one student many times. And for beginner adults, in these times for beginner adults, whether Jewish by birth or seeking a new spiritual path, we must continue to offer this sort of low barrier classes like the URJ's Taste of Judaism, which has brought so many people to us because that was their first introduction. And even in times like this of heightened security, we need to welcome the curious who enter and invite them to learn. For as the Mishkan HaSeder Haggadah puts it, this child becomes the fulfillment of the Jewish people's destiny. For the one who does not know how to ask, I see this group as non-Jews and the interfaith community. We have non-Jews in our midst with whom we interact informally. And we interact formally with the interfaith community through community work, most notably KUSH, Congregations United to Serve Humanity. In Kenosha, Beth Hillel is well positioned to teach what Judaism is to others. Often just by being among us, our non-Jewish members learn how to ask and ask to be involved. In the greater community, without us, Beth Hillel, there would be no interfaith endeavor in Kenosha. Over the course of my career, I and others have devoted many hours to activism and social justice work, speaking and teaching to various groups, and being a voice and a presence in times of turbulence and trouble. This is a crucial role that Beth Hillel must continue to pursue to interact with those who may not know how to ask. The great thing about being a teller of the Jewish story is that the teller learns and grows right along with the learners. You know, I don't know everything in the classes I teach until I prepare to teach them. As the explainer-in-chief at Beth Hillel all these years, I've delved into so many topics and considered and reconsidered so many familiar passages, always looking for new insight. And I've done this so long that it's hard to imagine not continuing this endeavor in some way. At this juncture, I'm not sure what path I will pursue in that regard as I retire, but I'm sure I will not lose sight of the Mishnah's injunction that the study of Torah is equal to them all. May we all find ourselves immersed in this pursuit in some way as we continue to grow as Jews. As the day of my retirement comes into closer view, I've been using my last several sermons to share with the congregation what has been important to me in my rabbinate. And this is the final sermon in which I share what has animated me as a rabbi over these past 4 decades. However, in case you're wondering, I will give one more sermon on a different theme on June 28th. A parable. When God was creating the world, God shared a secret with the angels. Human beings would be created b'tselem Elohim, in the image of God. Well, the angels were jealous and outraged by this pronouncement. Why should human beings be entrusted with such a precious gift when they will be so flawed? If humans find out their true power, they will abuse it. So, the angels decided to steal God's image. But now the angels needed a place to hide the image of God so that humanity would never find it. They held a meeting and brainstormed. Gabriel suggested that they hide it at the top of the highest mountain, but others objected. One day humans will learn to climb and they will find it. Mikael argued for hiding the image of God at the bottom of the sea, but others countered, humans will find a way to explore the deepest oceans. More hiding places were suggested, and all were rejected until finally Uriel, the wisest angel, said thoughtfully, I know a place that human beings will never look. So the angels used his plan, and they hid the holy image of God deep within the human soul. And to this day, God's image lies in the very place where we are least likely to search for it. The message of this parable that God's image resides deep inside each and every person on earth is an idea fundamental to Jewish teaching and essential to the well-being of any relationship, group, or society. What is the Tselem Elohim? Well, we translate it as God's image, but what does that really mean? To me, it means there is something beautiful, godlike, good, decent, worthwhile, even holy in every person. If we start with the assumption that everyone we encounter carries God's image within them, our interactions with them and our ongoing relationship with them will be more respectful and satisfying and will take on greater meaning and greater depth. But the parable also makes the point that searching for the Tselem Elohim within our fellow humans, is an art easily forgotten. Indeed, it is sometimes challenging to find that divine spark in the people we meet, or even to remember that we should be looking for it. As the parable teaches, God's image in human beings is often hidden in other people's brusqueness, in their seeming foreignness, their reticence, their gregariousness, their outspokenness, and more. And it is also hidden by our own self-absorption, preconceptions, and lack of vision that keep us from seeing it. Our goal is to remove the internal barriers that keep us from seeing God's image in others, and to search beyond the roadblocks that others put up, intentional or not. For me, this parable represents the most important of all the values or goals that I've tried to keep in the forefront in my role as a rabbi over the past 4 decades. Seeking to recognize the Tselem Elohim, the image of God in every person. As I've begun to clear out my files in preparation for my retirement, I've been reorganizing, for example, the file of conversion documents. And in so doing, I've had the opportunity to recall each person who chose Judaism and their particular journey. What a diverse collection of individuals, adults, young and old, babies, children, and teens, those marrying a Jew, those who had been living a Jewish life with a Jewish family for most of their adult life and then decided to make it official, those who came seemingly out of the blue with no prior experience with Jews or Judaism. Each one is unique and special. Each one brings his or her own reasons for making this choice. I suppose it could be said that one who is a mentor to a conversion candidate is specifically tasked with finding and nurturing each ger's Tselem Elohim. It is a profound and holy responsibility to have walked that path with so many. I have been motivated in my Rabbinate to try to discover the Tselem Elohim of every single person in our community, adults and children alike. I'm grateful for having spent most of my career in a small congregation for many reasons. Among the things that I am most thankful for is the opportunity to get to know our members well, which is much easier when the pool of people is smaller. I put energy into developing a personal relationship with each member. Surely over the years there have been people with whom I did not see eye to eye, who became disappointed in me or I in them. I did not reach in deeply enough to find their Tselem Elohim, or did not show well enough that I was seeking it. But even with my failures, I've been driven by the desire to show open-heartedness and graciousness of spirit, assuming the presence of Tselem Elohim in each person who enters our midst. How well I succeeded, only others can judge. I do believe that as a congregation overall, We have tried hard in this regard, that we have sought to demonstrate to members and guests through generosity and openness that we truly hold space for members and guests to be who they are when they are among us. Rabbi Yehuda Kurtzer has talked about the future of Jewish peoplehood being centered in knowing that one's presence in Jewish spaces matters. He spoke of taking his son on college tours, and as part of it, visiting the Hillels, or Jewish student centers, on every campus. His son was basing his decision in large part on the tenor and richness of the Jewish life on campus. And when it came down to the two final schools, Rabbi Kurtzer's son pointed out that while one school had a bigger Hillel with more robust programming, the smaller one's Hillel needed him more, and he knew it would matter much more to them that he was there. How do we show people that they matter and that their presence is desired? Welcoming people and encouraging diversity are very important, but not enough. Truly finding the Tselem Elohim in each person means making sure that each person feels at home. In the congregational setting, this is absolutely essential. Rabbi Rick Jacobs set a lofty standard for every Reformed congregation several years ago. He said that we need to show audacious hospitality. Audacious hospitality, said Rabbi Jacobs, isn't just a temporary act of kindness so people don't feel excluded. It's an ongoing invitation to be part of a community and a way to transform ourselves spiritually in the process. Audacious hospitality is a two-way street where synagogues and the stranger need each other, where we not only teach newcomers, but they teach us. Only by being inclusive can we be strong. Only by being open can we be whole. These are the words of Rabbi Jacobs. Now, this does not mean that every newcomer who enters our midst will feel immediately at home, nor does it mean that once integrated, all of our members will agree on everything. We come from vastly different backgrounds and life experiences, making full agreement impossible and really not even desirable. But audacious hospitality does mean that we invite all into our midst with equal enthusiasm, and we unconditionally support each other as a community, fully acknowledging and celebrating our variety and difference. A diverse congregation that feels like a home and a real community is a healthy community. Going back to the parable about the angels hiding the image of God, remember how they were worried that if human beings knew that they harbored the Tselem Elohim inside, that they would abuse it? They would think too much of themselves and seek too much power. The angels' worries weren't misplaced. And this is why the Hasidic master, Rabbi Simcha Bunim, is said to have carried around two pieces of paper in his pockets. On one was written, "I am but dust and ashes." And the other said, "For my sake was the world created." Knowing that we are created in the image of God can help us to find balance between these two extremes. And it's up to each of us to learn the art of seeing ourselves and others as individual sparks of the one who created us all, and using the knowledge that God is within us to bring out the best in ourselves, in others, and in our special community known as Beth Hillel. Kain Yehi Ratzon, may it be so.